Welcome to Thriller Recaps. Today, I am explaining the movie, Hidden Figures, explaining every scene as it happens. Watch till the end, and please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy this. Catherine and Mary waited while Dorothy repaired their broken-down ride by the roadside on their way to work at the NASA Research Center, where they worked as calculators performing simple math. A police officer stopped to check on them and asked for their IDs. He was surprised to learn they worked at NASA, as he didn't think women, especially black women, worked there. He offered to follow them to confirm this. At NASA, the top executives were getting paranoid about Russia reaching the moon before the USA. They were all trying to come up with ways to beat them, as the president was pressuring them to launch their own rocket first. There were fears that if Russia launched a human into space, they might also send a bomb to the United States. After a meeting, Al instructed Vivian, the supervisor of the East Computing Group, to find a capable mathematician. Vivian went to the West area and handed Dorothy some calculations she needed done. She then told Dorothy that the Space Task Group needed a temporary computer. Dorothy recommended Catherine for the job, saying she could handle any number given to her. Dorothy, who had been effectively performing the supervisor role in the West area, asked Vivian if she would be officially appointed to the position. Vivian regretfully informed her that she had inquired about it but was told it would not be happening, leaving Dorothy disappointed. In this movie, they call the black women, who help solve math calculations manually, computers. In another scene, Mary's boss, Carl Zielinski, asked her opinion on why the test failed and how to fix it. She shared her thoughts, impressing him so much that he suggested she apply for the engineer training program. Mary declined, saying that, as a black woman, it was impossible for her. Carl, a Polish Jew, disagreed, sharing how he became an engineer despite prejudice. He asked if she would want to be an engineer if she were a white male. She replied that she wouldn't need to wish because she would already be one. In another scene, Catherine, carrying a box of her belongings, walked with Vivian to the Space Task Group. Vivian told her the job wasn't permanent, and that other computers didn't last more than a few days. She added that Catherine was the first black computer to work there, so she shouldn't embarrass her. Catherine entered a room full of white men and was immediately mistaken for the janitor who came for the trash. She introduced herself to the white female secretary, Ruth. Ruth told her that their boss, Al, wouldn't warm up to her, then showed her where to sit. Al came out of his office with Carl, asking for the computer, and Catherine was introduced to him. Al gave Catherine some numbers to work on and told his head engineer, Paul, to give her his numbers too. Paul was displeased but agreed and handed Catherine several books to work on. Catherine felt pressed and asked Ruth where she could find the ladies' room, but Ruth said she didn't know. So, Catherine left in a hurry to find one. The only one she saw in the building was strictly for white women. So, she ran out of the building to use the one at her old workplace. Catherine ran back to the office, only to be questioned by Ruth about her whereabouts and given more work. Al told her he wanted it done by the end of the day. Catherine went to the coffee machine to get some coffee, unaware that the whole office was watching her because she was black. By the end of the day, only she and Al were left, so she went to submit her work. Al asked Catherine what she thought NASA was trying to accomplish. She replied that they were trying to send a man to space, and he confirmed she was right. Then he told her to throw her work in the bin, explaining it wasn't because her work was bad but because things moved quickly there. He said they needed to look beyond the numbers and find answers that didn't yet exist. He told her they hadn't launched anything into space yet, but in his mind, he was already there, and he asked if she was too. She said she was. After their conversation, Catherine left and found Mary and Dorothy, who had been waiting for her for hours. On the drive home, Dorothy was displeased about not being officially made a supervisor yet. Catherine complained about her new duty being too fast and that she was afraid she might be sent back or lose her job. Dorothy reassured her that she was very capable of handling the job. Catherine got home to meet her mom and heard her daughters quarreling. They shared what their day was like, and Catherine told them about now working hard to help the NASA men. The next day, Catherine went to church with her mom, her friends, and their kids. The pastor preached about black people being in places they never thought they would ever be. He acknowledged Catherine and her friends for their work at NASA, then recognized Jim Johnson, who was going to set up a National Guard unit there. After the service, Mary and her husband, Levi, talked about her becoming a female engineer. He thought it wouldn't be possible, especially since she was a black female. She warned him to stop the conversation unless he wanted her to speak back at him in front of everyone. Soon after, Mary and Dorothy stylishly set Catherine up with Jim. Jim and Catherine went on a walk, and he told her he had heard she worked for NASA. She told him her job was to do calculations to aid the launches. He expressed surprise at women doing such work at NASA, which offended Catherine. She told him about her achievements and put him in his place before walking off. At work the next day, Catherine noticed a separate coffee jug labeled colored, designated for her. Just then, as Navy pilots were receiving a warm welcome from the employees' call, John decided to say hello to the black workers at the West Computing Group, even though there was a clear separation between the white and black employees. While Dorothy was going to submit the calculations her team had done to Vivian, she noticed that NASA had bought an IBM machine. Dorothy met Vivian and asked her about the machine. Vivian explained what it was and its calculating capacity. In another part of NASA, Paul gave Catherine some calculations to check, but they had some missing parts with lines struck out. Catherine complained about not being allowed to know the whole thing she was working on to be more effective. Paul told her to work with what she was given because the words that had been struck off were classified, and they wouldn't allow her, being black, to know what they were. While working, she checked the words using light to see through the black lines. She climbed the large board, where she wrote down calculations. While working, Catherine felt pressed and rushed to the bathroom at her old workplace, as there was none close by for black people, forgetting her calculations on the board. Her calculations were noticed by everyone in the department. Amazed, Al asked who did the calculations, and Ruth told him it was Catherine. When Catherine returned, Al called her into his office and questioned how she knew the classified information. She explained that she held the paper up to the light to read it. Al tried it and saw the words, then handed the papers to Paul. He asked Catherine if she was a Russian spy, and she replied that she was not Russian, which Ruth confirmed. Al then told Paul to give Catherine all the materials she needed and not to hide information from her anymore. Paul tried to talk him out of it, but Al insisted. At the colored cafeteria, Mary told the ladies that she couldn't apply for the engineering training because she had to take an extension course at the University of Virginia, and blacks were not allowed there. Mary complained about how, whenever black people tried to get ahead, the rules were changed against them. Then she found a shortcut listed in the requirements handbook, getting certified by taking classes at Hampton High School. However, the high school was all white and wouldn't let her attend. Dorothy advised her to take the matter to court for help. Later, Dorothy took her sons to a library, but the librarian gave her problems for taking books from the white section instead of the colored section. Dorothy explained that the book she wanted wasn't in the colored section, but the librarian said that was the way it was and sent her out. In another scene, while Jim was apologizing to Catherine and trying to get to know her, news came on about Russia sending Yuri Gagarin to space, making the Americans unhappy. Immediately, Al called a meeting to discuss why they were behind Russia in space exploration. He asked how Russia managed to go to space twice while they hadn't succeeded. He wondered if Russia had more advanced technology. Al then said they would be working late from now on, and if anyone had a problem with that, they should leave. For those who stayed, he told them to call their families to let them know they'd be coming home late and mention there wouldn't be any overtime pay. Everyone went back to their desks to make their calls. Paul gave Catherine more work to finish by the end of the day, and she ran to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Mary got a court date and excitedly showed Carl during a press conference at NASA. The operators couldn't get the IBM machine to work, so Dorothy sneaked into the IBM machine room to study it. She told the girls in the West area about its capabilities, but they worried they couldn't handle it. Dorothy insisted they learn to use it or risk losing their jobs. Dorothy figured out how to operate the IBM machine, and it started working. Al noticed Catherine was not at her desk. Meanwhile, Catherine was running in the rain to use the colored restroom, then rushed back, drenched. Al asked where she went every day. She told him she went to the restroom, which he found hard to believe. She explained the segregation at the workplace, and that there was no colored restroom nearby, so she had to walk a long distance. She got emotional, saying she worked day and night, drinking from a separate coffee jug no one else used. Calming down, she apologized for needing to use the bathroom several times a day, then picked up her bag and walked out. Al saw the coffee jug labeled colored, and looked at everyone with disappointment. He removed the sticker with the word. Then, he went to the colored restroom at the West area, where he knocked down the colored sign, telling the black women, including Catherine, to use any restroom they wanted. He said there were no more white or colored restrooms because they all pooped the same color. Jim, being caring, visited Catherine with soup, saying he heard she had caught a cold. They enjoyed this with the kids. Rocket Freedom 7 was launched into space successfully, and Catherine and her family watched the news on TV. At work, they were tasked with bringing Freedom 7's capsule back to Earth. At Mary's house, Levi watched the news about 4 white men being arrested for throwing a firebomb into a bus with black people. Mary found him watching it with the kids and told him they shouldn't be seeing it, but he insisted they needed to understand what was happening between the whites and blacks. The next day, Mary attended her court hearing. The judge told her that what she was asking for was impossible. She asked to approach the bench, and he agreed. Mary appealed to him by highlighting his achievements as the first in many things. She suggested that he could be remembered 100 years from now as the first judge to allow a black woman to attend an all-white school. This seemed to appease the judge, so he approved of her attending, but only night classes. Al was questioned by the Senate about the capsule sinking and the safety of Colonel John. Al explained what happened and promised to bring Colonel John back safely. He then put his team back to intense work. Paul lectured everyone about the issues they had with each of the capsules. He told them about the go/no-go area, where if a capsule was brought in too soon, it might end up frying the astronaut inside it, and if it was brought in too late, it would be pushed out of Earth's gravity. Catherine asked Paul to be allowed to attend the briefings so she could be more useful. He told her it was a closed-door meeting, and she replied that she needed to have information on the changes to keep up with them. He told her to calculate with what she was given. Dorothy was caught inside the IBM machine room by the operators. They were shocked that she got the machine to work. Catherine submitted the parameters for Friendship 7 to Paul, but he told her there had been a change in the numbers, so her reports weren't useful, and she should change them. Al saw them arguing and asked what was going on. Catherine used that moment to ask Al to let her attend the Paragon briefings. Al asked Paul why she wasn't allowed in the briefings. Catherine argued that she couldn't do her work effectively if she didn't get all the data as soon as it was available. Paul argued that the briefings weren't for civilians and made a statement that she was also a woman and there was no protocol for her to attend. Al shut him down immediately and authorized her to attend the meeting. The room of men fell silent upon seeing Catherine attend the meeting, so Al introduced her to them. Al was asked where Colonel John's go/no-go point would be, but the right calculation had not been done. So, he gave Catherine chalk to do the calculation. She did it, impressing everyone. In the IBM machine room, the supervising operator told Al that he needed more programmers to help. Al told him to figure it out, or they wouldn't be paid for any of their work. They sought out Dorothy to join them in the IBM machine room. Dorothy asked if the girls she trained and worked with could join too, but Vivian said she was the only one needed. Dorothy then asked what would happen to the girls if the machine worked as needed. Vivian told her they might all be laid off after Colonel John's launch. Dorothy refused to work with them unless the girls could join her. Dorothy got her way, and she and the girls were now allowed to work with the IBM machine department. In the main area, Al watched Catherine do calculations on the board. He told Paul that his job was to find a genius among geniuses so they could all be lifted. On the first day of Mary's night class, she entered the room to find just white males. The teacher questioned her, saying the curriculum wasn't designed for women. She replied that it wasn't designed for men either, then took her seat. Meanwhile, as Catherine analyzed the math, she realized that the solution might be in the old math, not the new. She got an idea and rushed to the West Computing Group. Catherine picked up a book from the West Computing Group, which she used to get the calculations right. Al saw this and agreed they had found the answer they were looking for. In another scene, Vivian met Dorothy and told her she didn't have anything against her. She asked if Dorothy could help teach some girls in the East Computing Group about IBM. Dorothy replied that she wasn't authorized to make such decisions because she wasn't the supervisor. Catherine came home to a surprise proposal from Jim, and she agreed to marry him. The next day, Al apologized to Catherine, saying the department no longer needed her services and it was out of his control. She understood and was told she would be returning to the West Computing Group. While packing her belongings, Ruth congratulated her on her engagement and gave her a pearl necklace from Al as a wedding gift. Catherine and Jim then got married. On the day of the launch, Al realized that IBM's recovery coordinates were incorrect, which could pose a big problem. He called Colonel John and informed him about the issue. John suggested having Catherine look at the coordinates, saying if she said they were good to go, so was he. Al sent Sam Turner to find Catherine and get her to look at the numbers. Sam ran to the West Computing Group, barging into the department where the women were watching the launch. He told Catherine that Al wanted her to verify the coordinates, so she immediately started working on it. She solved the coordinate numbers and ran back to the Space Task Group. When Sam delivered the coordinates, Catherine was allowed into the room. Al then called Catherine back, giving her the ID she needed to enter the room. Al talked to Colonel John, telling him that the coordinates had been verified by Catherine. John mentioned how hard it was to trust someone he wasn't looking in the eye, but he told Al to thank Catherine for him, which pleased her. Al wished him good luck. Colonel John boarded the Friendship 7 capsule. The rocket was successfully launched and reached space. At the West Computing Group, Vivian told Dorothy that the IBM group wanted her and her team permanently and that she had officially been made supervisor. Paul noticed a warning light from the Friendship 7 capsule and informed Al, suspecting the heat shield might be loose. Everyone could see this because it was televised. Al proposed a solution, which Paul doubted, but Catherine said it would work until Colonel John reached the go/no-go point. More instructions were given to Colonel John to aid his safe landing. Suddenly, they lost all communication with him at the communication blackout zone after he reported the capsule was on fire from the outside. The whole country focused on hearing news of Colonel John's safe landing. The Space Task Group called Colonel John a few times, but there was no response. Just then, his communication was restored, and he responded to them, filling everyone with relief. He was given the coordinates to land for recovery, and he landed safely. Everyone cheered for the good news. Al shook Catherine's hand, telling her that her work was excellent. Colonel John Glenn successfully completed 3 out of a scheduled 7-orbit flight. His Friendship 7 mission turned the tide for the space race, which propelled NASA to the Moon in 1969. Mary became NASA's and America's first female African-American aeronautic engineer. She was then appointed Langley's Women's Program Manager, where she fought to advance women of all colors. Dorothy became NASA's first African-American supervisor, and as a Fortran specialist, she was regarded as one of the most brilliant minds at NASA. Catherine continued to work for the Space Task Group, where she did the calculations for the launch of Apollo 2 to the Moon and the Space Shuttle.